You have been here before, not in a dream, nor in the telling of a story, but in the eternity of a single moment. The in-between isn't a place you go to or come from. It's simply a place you are. It was with you in the first numbered breath, and it will remain in the counted last. Every step you've taken, every turn you've made, has led you here. Welcome to the in-between.
Ever wonder where we go when we die? Is there in fact a place in the cosmos, or is it a place in time where our soul travels? And what if we die and then miraculously come back to life? Are we the same person, or are we a different person altogether? My name is Jim Bruton. I've lived an adventurous life that took an unexpected turn when an experimental aircraft I was flying lost its engine and crashed. Because of this, I had what is commonly known as a near-death experience. For myself and the men and women you will meet, it involved a transformation. Remembering who we were after an entire life of chasing the world. And finally, putting things back into their proper place. So how did I get here? It began as a child. Growing up in Jacksonville, Florida in the 1960s, I lived with the Vietnam War on one side and the promise of going to the moon on the other. With a strong imagination and idealism of a child, I chose the utopian vision of the future, reinforced by science fiction, movies, and monthly issues of Popular Mechanics. I extended that idealism. I wanted to live in the future now. So I began to draw up what I called inventions, science fiction devices and systems I wanted to build. I would draw old airplanes from the age of aviation discovery. As I built their small models, I promised myself that one day I would fly such planes. I was the first in the world to figure out how to send video through a satellite telephone, transmitting live video from extreme locations all over the world. After 9/11, I became a war correspondent for NBC News, producing stories from active war zones. Other than dreams of the future, travel and adventure, there was one other desire I had as a child, the desire to know God. Once a year, my father's mother, a Unity minister, would come to visit. I had many questions for her in my search for spiritual understanding. While reporting live from Baghdad, it occurred to me that I was doing all right as the world measured it. But I didn't have the stability of a family, nor did I have a home where I could pursue my interest in building and flying antique-style aircraft. Once I settled down, I built a World War I German fighter, then a smaller, more whimsical design from the French 1930s. It was on my second test flight that I lost my engine. I crashed into a forest, rupturing both lungs, breaking all my ribs, and my right leg, it looked like a pretzel. Landing in the hospital, I was met by the Hartford trauma team. Their high level of training and sense of urgency certainly saved my life. I have no memory of those moments in the ER, no images from my crash or even 2 days prior. A medically induced coma was administered. When they induced the coma, my near-death experience began. I entered the in-between. I appeared on the terrace of a tall building, along the skyline of a post-apocalyptic city. As I scanned the destroyed and gray skyline, there wasn't a sign of life to be seen. In contrast to other near-death experiences, I did not go down a tunnel, nor did I meet dead loved ones. Dark and heavy clouds hung above me, ready to unleash the mother of all storms. Everything was still. I looked to my left and saw the only thing of real interest, a tall 4 or 5 story high sculpture of an egg, made from open latticework. I could see slight movement suspended in the air within, so I walked over to it and studied it. A disembodied voice responds, a deep, positive tone, all-knowing.
This is the future, birthing into the now.
I watched the otherworldly dance of the gears, like a multi-dimensional model of time. They came to rest, so I reached through a gap in the side of the egg. I wanted to touch them.
This is the process of becoming.
As I looked at the gears within my mind, I see something like a video feed of future events. One brush has my outstretched hand, and suddenly, I double over in pain.
Each gear is the probability of a thought, word, or action in your future.
With a reflex, I rip the gear out, pulling it through the egg's lattice wall and throw it away.
Your destiny is resetting itself around what you have removed.
How did I know I could do that? Pull that gear out, removing that future moment.
Why else are you here?
I have no idea. I don't even know what this place is.
You are in the in-between.
In between what?
The impossible now between the past and the future.
This makes no sense whatsoever.
Yet here you are, standing inside the eternity of a single moment.
It's starting to look like if I don't have a bad future, then I have no future at all.
You can't change the past, but you can make better choices in the future. If those with choices make poor use of them, then offering fewer possibilities could be called mercy.
It's as if this place were made so I could do one thing and one thing only, with no chance of screwing it up.
You prayed for something for which being here is the answer. And now, the man who fell from the sky is not the same who flew into it.
I think I can live with this now. I began to research and finally discovered near-death experiences. I learned of the challenges I could expect, and among them were relationships, beginning with my marriage. For NDEers, as we are called, divorce rates are at a staggering 78%. To make a long story short, it became true for me. Eventually, I presented my story at the National Conference of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. That is when I met Mary Helen Hensley and PMH Atwater. They both heard my presentation and encouraged me to write a book. The rest is history. In December of 1991, Mary Helen was involved in a car accident resulting in an NDE that changed her life forever. After the accident, a lifelong ability to communicate with those in spirit, coupled with the gift to see future events, was enhanced by a new endowment to touch an individual, download their past, and use this information to facilitate healing.
And so when I died and realized that we're all playing these different roles on multiple occasions when we come in here, sometimes you're the wonderful person, you're the saint, you're the sinner, you're the hero, you're the asshole. You can be all of those things and yet be none of them at the same time. And it was imperative for me in order to do the work that I was going to do, to be dropped into this environment, which is actually really judgy, if we're going to be honest, and to find my way out of it. And once I was right at the precipice, I'm kind of finding my way, but I'm not utilizing what's available to me. Bam. That's when I have the proverbial metaphorical, metaphysical crossroads of my life. I literally get knocked out of my body into another experience in order to go, you're gonna do a little bit better with how you're spending your time when you get back. And I hit the ground running ever since.
Today, she divides her time between motivational speaking, writing, and healing.
I've been doing this for so long, and you've heard so many different stories, and it's always fun to hear something that is coming from a slightly different perspective, something with a twist. I travel all over the world, and so I fly a lot. And as someone who's already been dead and doesn't fear death, I hate flying. I do it because it's necessary to get from here to here. And so that's no problem, but I just don't enjoy it. And so I remember seeing that your story was going to be about how you died in this plane crash. I was like, okay, I'm going. Do something that scares you every day. I'm going to listen about how this dude died in a plane crash, and I'm going to sit with it. And I was absolutely captivated, enthralled. And I guess because it was your first time really kind of doing this on the circuit, I've been doing it for so many years that you get used to hearing the stories and the type of characters that we interact with. And there was something that was so fresh.
Her brush with death was a life-defining experience, full of challenges.
For me, when I came back, one of the things that enhanced for me was I was always able to see the energy field around people. I have always known before it became popular to say, we're not a body with a soul, we're a soul residing within a body. But I take it another step. It's not like the soul is stuffed down into this physical body. The soul, you've got a huge radius. Like that essence and who you really are is in a room long before your body is. Your body's still walking through the door. And so I've always been able to see that energy field. What I started to realize after the NDE was that I could immediately see someone who had had one because they had what looked like an overlay, a double heart chakra. And so this was all terminology I didn't know. I just saw it. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know, what it was. I know when we're talking about the chakral systems and we're these beautiful vortices of energy that are swirling in different areas that help us deal with complex aspects of human existence. One thing I knew was like, oh, that guy's got two. He's been dead. Oh, and then you talk to them and yes, they had been dead. And then you're like, oh, that lady's got two. Oh, she died on the operating table. And so that kind of became a truth meter for me.
These experiences have led to inconvenient spiritual truths.
And I often tell a story about when my father was passing, and he was a minister for 60 years. And so he wasn't a holy roller, even though we live in the Bible Belt. He was a big football coach, so it was always kind of sports oriented, so people loved his sermons. It was always about what happened on the football field Friday night, and he was just really engaging and had this big booming voice, and people just enjoyed listening to him. But he had his ideas about what happened to us, about heaven and hell, and he, conformed to that kind of Christian ethos. And so we're at this point, he had Alzheimer's, and he's going through the death experience, and he's reaching up all of a sudden, and he's like, Mama's there. And he hadn't spoken in months. And I was like, hey, Dad. And he was like, hey, sugar. And I was like, how's everything going? And he goes, well, it's more beautiful than anything you ever wrote about. And so we're having this moment and exchange, and then he freezes because his father is there. And by my dad's own judgment, his own coffee filter of standards of what cuts the mustard to get to heaven or hell, his dad hadn't made it. And he had worried his entire adult life about that. So next thing you're seeing the minister laying in the bed, reaching up to the heavens in awe of everything and that he is seeing. And he turns to Mom and he goes, Helen, I've had it wrong all along. You can't mess this thing up. Everybody's welcome. And having been dead myself, Jim, That is a bigger mic drop moment for me than coming back crashing into this plane after dying, breaking my neck in a 75-mile-an-hour car crash.
Apparently, these after effects of her NDE run in the family.
Mama Helen and I have had a ball. We've traveled this world. We're working on our second book right now. She's just an amazing, fabulous, funny. You've met her. She's adorable. She's just everything in a Southern belle with a little cheeky grin, and she's an awesome person. So as we go through this process, I'm realizing as I'm looking at her, the greatest gift that she ever gave me was that with blind faith, because she was my mother, and she was the one who was there when those beings appeared to my father and said, she's gonna be a little bit different. My mother has picked up the phone to call me to tell me somebody has died, and I've cut her off going, I know they were already here all of my life. Or she's called to tell me something that I already knew, or I've called to tell her something that happened and then it happens later on in her life. We've had this kind of relationship, dancing back and forth with this stuff. My guide is her father. So she has just accepted with absolute trust, belief, and faith everything that I've ever told her. And I realize 56 years into it, what a blessing that has been for me. It is a relationship that I will miss dearly.
PMH Atwater is one of the original researchers in the field of near-death studies, having begun her work in 1978 and completing 21 books on her findings, some of which have now been verified in clinical settings. PMH has won many awards, appeared on numerous TV shows, and spoken around the world, always inviting us to look past the obvious for the deeper truth within.
Suddenly, everything changes. And when you come back from a near-death experience, you're never the same again. You just never are. And if you don't believe me, ask your loved ones. What do they think of you? They think maybe you're odd, or you're a little different, or you just think different. You are different.
Her books also explain the after effects of a colloidal condition and how it influences one's sensitivity to electronics, emotions, or environments.
Let me give you an example. We've got here a big vat of water. Great big vat of water. And in the middle of that water are paddles. And the paddles are spinning the water. So the water is spinning faster and faster and faster, and suddenly something happens to cause the water to reverse. At that moment of reversal, everything in that water suspends. It doesn't go anywhere, it just suspends. And in that suspension, that's when the colloidal condition is created. That is to say, everything in that suspension is permanently imprinted by being in that suspension. You're neither here or there, you are suspended. And in that suspension, you take on different characteristics.
PMH admits integration seems to be the most difficult phase. The trick is grounding a transcendent experience into daily human life without becoming destabilized.
Well, certainly books help. But when you're reading about this kind of thing, and it's happened to other people, or you're at a meeting of other people who've had this kind of thing, the International Association of Near-Death Studies, IANDS. I have so much material out, and that material is so helpful. I wish the big book of near-death experiences could be in every hospital in the world. I wish it could be everywhere, where people could read that and see how normal that is for that person to behave in that manner. And that it's okay if you're different, it's okay if they're different.
PMH has also noticed patterns in how people who've integrated their NDEs effectively live in terms of relationships, creativity, or service.
In those marriages or relationships that last are the ones that are more open and are not demanding that the person be the same they were before. If you're more open, if you're more understanding, if you're more willing, then it's a lot easier then to relate and move on, or move on together, even with children. This period of honoring differences is so important. It really, it's absolutely necessary. Honor differences. For them and for you. Honor your differences.
Rob Gentile is an extremely fortunate man, having survived not one but 2 near-death experiences. Rob credits his second chances to his unwavering relationship with God, a loving marriage with his wife Melanie, and the unconditional love from his daughter Maria. What was your path like in reintegrating with life here in terms of yourself, your work, your family, of course with Maria, and just seeing life from a much bigger perspective?
When I had that moment when I was taken up into what I call the ethereal, in that moment when I saw this beautiful web, this tapestry of lights, all interwoven, and it seemed to just extend out into infinity. And I was shown that each little spark of light that you talk about was a quark, and quarks are, as far as we know today, this may change because science is always evolving, right? Are the smallest building blocks of matter. And each one of those little quarks or sparks of light in that web, which we know from science class what a nucleus looks like, right? Little tentacles that go out and they connect, kind of like a synapse, right? It's a neuron. So each one of these little neurons or quarks of light represented a life. And they were all woven together to create this beautiful tapestry that hung on the ceiling of the universe. And when I was connected to everything, I thought to myself, if I love, the light will spread. But if I hurt myself, I'll hurt everything that's connected to me. And that was an incredible revelation to me. So when I came out of that near-death experience and in my everyday life, like you're saying, where do I see those connections? That helped me understand how we're all connected. Every one of us, we all come from the same place. We're all one. We're all connected.
On reflection, if you could go back to when you had your NDE and ask yourself a question that at that time you could not answer, what would that question be?
Why couldn't I remember more of that experience and be able to share it? When I wrote my book, it took me 3 years to write the book. There's a chapter in the book entitled Into the Ethereal, which is that in-between space. It's the shortest chapter in the book, and I think it took me almost a year to write because there's no language. There's no way to describe it. It's inexplicable. I even thought about, should I create some kind of language to be able to explain this, because it's impossible to explain. And I I regret that I couldn't remember more. I remember laying in bed after Maria came to me and she said, "Just love me." And I cried out into that infinite space, "I never want to leave here." And then I found myself back in my hospital bed, and the nurse was running up to put something in my IV because I was in tachycardia. I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm already starting to lose some of the details, because when I was in that place, it was almost as if I knew the answer to any question. All I had to do was think about it, and the answer came.
You once said your turning point was when you said, "Do with me what you will." How has that echoed throughout your life since?
I have another very personal story about that I've never really shared with anyone at all, which I think is the best example of it. First of all, it's through service that gives us the extraordinary opportunity to meet God in the flesh. And I'll never forget the day. This happened, way before heart transplant. It was way into our journey with Maria, like 15 years into our journey with Maria. It was very, very difficult. All of her physical needs, things like that. And one of her big issues was digestion. She was constantly getting impacted and passing whole foods and failure to thrive. So one of the ways that we would relieve her from getting septic was to give her coffee enemas. And so I was charged with that detail. So I'll never forget, one day, it was like in February, I think, cold, rainy day, one of those days which it's very easy to get down and feel sorry for yourself. And boy, I'll tell you, I was filled with self-pity that day. And I'll never forget, I had Maria in the tub, and I got this coffee enema, on the spigot, and I'm giving this kid a coffee enema, and she's laying in the tub, and I've got a little bit of warm water in there. And I start the whole process, and I just fell apart. And I just broke down, and I just kept on saying, God, if you exist, where are you? For Christ's sake, help this child. How much more can we go through with this kid? Well, as clear as I'm talking to you, this voice comes. And it said, "Look at me, I'm right here." And I looked up, and I looked up at Maria, and she had this incredible smile on her face, this beautiful smile on her face, glowing, like, hey, you finally get it, And it was in that moment that I realized that God existed for the first time in my life. And before then, I knew that God existed, but wasn't sure. It was my insurance policy. Hey, I believe in God just in case something bad happens. But it was that day that convinced me.
Their devotion to Maria is unwavering, a perfect little girl in every way. During a doctor's visit, she was given several routine vaccinations. Shortly thereafter, the decline in her health worsened rapidly.
It was challenging, but God took over. He just totally took over the situation, and I allowed it. Because I knew that I saw Rob die. I was there, I prayed, and I realized that if he brought him back from the dead, he was not going to take him during that year and a half. Rob had a purpose that he had not fulfilled, and God was going to make sure that he did. And that gave me a lot of strength. Maria has shown us it's not about ourselves, it's about service. And we've been able to watch each other grow and change and serve not just Maria, but a little better at serving each other as well. A lot better. But anyway, so it showed us things in each other we didn't know existed. And we're very dedicated to her and each other.
So it's those shared experiences that have made us what we are. It was my experience through the near death, through her brother coming to me, through all those experiences, all the doctors that helped save my life, all the lessons we've learned from them, and then all of the things that Maria has taught us that's helped her in her career as a pharmacist, and all the things that she's learned. And it's been, all of these stories, our story, my story, her story, Maria, the caregivers, the things that they've shared, all these things are woven together, just kind of like that tapestry of lights that I saw, how it's all connected. This all comes full circle. I think what Maria would want the world to know about her is that she is perfect and whole in spirit, just like the rest of us. She's no different. Just because she can express, in the brain, language and speech are two different things. So she has language, she just doesn't have speech. But that's the beauty of the silent voice. These are the greatest lessons,
In the Gentile story, we see not just the paranormal, but the profoundly human experience. We began this journey in mystery, but it ends not in answers, rather in the company of those who live with the questions. The in-between is not distant. It lives in the choices we make, the love we keep, and the courage we carry. This is not the conclusion of a tale. It is the beginning of a larger conversation, where the paranormal is not spectacle, but a mirror, showing us who we are and who we might yet become. Welcome, then, not to an ending, but to the opening of a path, the path of the in-between.